Up next, we have the City of Colorado Springs, Brian Stigner and Gayle Surdivant, presenting on the PRRTA Asset Management and Funding Program. Let me get this running for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gayle Surdivant. I'm the City Engineer and Deputy Public Works Director. I want to start off by saying I loved the discussion on chili early on, but I'm very surprised with all the engineers and bridge folks in the room that we did not get any Pi Day jokes. I was totally planning on a Pi Day sweater, but anyway, messed that up. Anyway, I'm joined today with my colleague Brian Stigner, who's our Bridge Asset Manager. To give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today, I want to start a little bit about our primary funding source that we're using to address our bridge assets within the City of Colorado Springs. And then Brian's going to jump into more specifics about our bridge management process, and then we have to use that for prioritization. The El Paso County or the Pikes Peak region put the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority in place by a vote of the people in 2004, and it includes, covers 6 jurisdictions within our county. What that did, that put a 1-cent sales tax in place. And one of the things that's beautiful for us for sales tax, we have a lot of tourism within Colorado Springs, so we are able to capture the money that both local citizens spend and then tourist spends and reinvest them in our community. It put that 1-cent sales tax in place, and through the ballot, it's broken into 3 components. The first component goes dedicated to 10% for transit operations, and that does not have a sunset date. 35% goes into our maintenance, and that also does not sunset. The 55% that goes to capital are actually applied to a prioritized list of projects that must be approved by voters every 10 years. They just went back to the ballot in November of 2022, and it was approved by 80% by the voters. And so our current authorization on that capital component is through 2034. So what goes into those components? I'm going to talk about capital at first, that 55%. That covers, again, we have both an A-list and a B-list prioritized name of projects, and those projects can be specific bridge replacement projects, and others can be larger transportation projects that include bridges. And then the maintenance or that 35% piece goes a lot to pavement preservation, intersection improvements, concrete work, walls we have within a right-of-way, and most importantly, bridge repair and maintenance. Again, jumping into that 55% sales tax and nail it down on how it applies to our bridges. First of all, that results in about $60 million for the city per year. In between 2025 and 2024, 2015 and 2024, that resulted in about 17 replacements and 5 new bridges. And we're projected with our current extension between 25 and 34 to have 11 replacements and 10 new bridges. The other thing that's included in that capital component is what we refer to as an emergency bridge fund. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. That maintenance piece, or that 35% between 2005 and 2021, has resulted in $511 million for the city. And again, as that gets applied to the pavement, concrete, or other structures in our bridges, we have a good application, and our bridge maintenance fund averages $8.5 million per year. All right, I'm now going to turn it over to Brian. He's going to talk more specifically about our bridge bridge asset management program, and then we're going to come back and talk more specifically about the funding and how we leverage it.
As mentioned earlier, I'm the bridge asset manager for the City of Colorado Springs. So I'll start with just a high-level overview of our bridge assets. We have 461 bridge assets split about evenly between major and minor structures with 2 tunnels. Our average MBIS condition rating from the bridge inspection standards is just over a 6, and the average age of our infrastructure is approximately 41 years. I don't know if the graphic's legible or not, but about 70% of our inventory is culverts. Our bridge program, basically the way the workflow functions for our bridge program is we receive the bridge MBIS inspection data from the off-system bridge inspection program. In addition to the off-system program, we perform minor inspections on our structures that range between 4 and 20 feet in span. And we have an enhanced inspection program where we perform more frequent inspection intervals for our critically rated infrastructure, some of our infrastructure that's kind of in need of urgent maintenance and repair that we haven't been able to get to yet. The program basically goes through the data that we receive, and we start identifying our capital funding needs. We break down our capital funding needs into 5-year bands, which feeds into the 10-year list of projects that Gayle mentioned earlier that ultimately go on the ballot for capital replacement. Additionally, we perform hydraulic evaluations as part of this program to understand if we need to replace a structure, not necessarily due to its structural condition, but potentially due to its hydraulic adequacy. And we perform replacement analysis and studies of the bridges that we're planning to replace in the capital program, just to have a better, accurate estimate of what our funding needs will be. Finally, we place a large emphasis on our preventative maintenance. A lot of our infrastructure doesn't have a waterproofing system in place, so we're going through and adding a lot of that with sealers and waterproof projects, and we're addressing a lot of our corrugated metal pipes with pipelining projects. Our main prioritization tool for the city is our City Health Index. It's modeled after the FHWA Health Index and is tailored towards the city's needs. It's comprised of 5 categories. We have a condition index, which is largely based on the MBIS condition ratings for deck, super sub, and culvert. We have a function index, which is largely geometry based with vertical clearances and approach geometry. We have a safety index, which is risk-based issues such as hydraulic capacity and traffic safety. We have a remaining life index, which is remaining life expectancy based on condition ratings and the controlling components, and an assessment ratio, which focuses on our pedestrian needs and missing sidewalks in the city. The image here is a snapshot from our bridge asset program. As mentioned earlier, we break down our capital expenditure needs into 5-year bands. So A, B, C, and D are shown here. This kind of shows the liabilities. Similar to the other agencies, we had a lot of infrastructure built in the 70s and 80s. And so we have a looming liability in that band C. You can see we're estimating that 54 structures are going to need to be replaced. So that's where maintenance really comes in. We need to prolong the life of our structures to the maximum extent possible. The bridge program at the city has really come a long way in the last 20 years. About 20 years ago, before PRRTA was put in place, the maintenance funding for the city was approximately $250K a year. In 2004, 2005, when PRRTA was implemented, it jumped to $1.8 million per year, and it has steadily increased ever since. From 2015 to 2023, we've averaged about 4 rehabs or replacements on the capital side per year. When we have capital needs on our structures, we start to look at the factors between rehabs and replacements. The primary factors that we consider are the cost evaluation, what portion of a replacement cost is a rehab going to take, the hydraulic adequacy, are there other needs, such as traffic needs, pedestrian needs, does the structure need to be widened, as well as the remaining life of the other structural components that are not being covered by the rehab. So we can evaluate that from the element level data from the inspection reports. The photo here is a redeck that we did last year on a culvert. We replaced the top slab. The risks of our program currently are risks that everyone's facing. Cost escalation. Construction costs have ballooned over the last few years. Additionally, we rely on sales tax-based funding, so it's highly variable. We don't necessarily know exactly how much we're going to get each year. If there's an economic recession, we're impacted by that pretty heavily. Changing regulations, such as greenhouse gas emissions, stormwater, et cetera. Environmental concerns, railroads. We have a lot of railroad bridges that cross our inventory that impact our roadways that we need to address, and delays, which, railroads and delays kind of go hand in hand. Some of the challenges of our program currently is our replacement needs are outpacing our capital funding, even with this program in place. 69 of our structures are beyond their expected service life. And as I mentioned earlier, a large portion of our inventory lacks a waterproof system. So we're addressing them with as many projects as we can. On top of that minor structure funding, there's no federal minor structure inspection program, and that's over 200 structures on our inventory that we have to inspect, maintain, and replace over time. So as mentioned earlier, a lot of our structures are culverts. We have 43 corrugated metal pipes with an average age of 43. So many of them are beyond their expected service life. So we're methodically going through all of these structures to determine what the best scenario is. Basically, the approach we're taking to these corrugated metal pipes is, are they hydraulically adequate? If they are hydraulically adequate, we consider rehabbing them with the project that we're implementing most commonly now is a cured in-place pipe, effectively using the corrugated metal pipe as a formwork for a cast-in-place replacement. We're anticipating that we should get 50-plus years out of those replacements and effectively a new structure for a minimal cost. We don't need to dig a trench. We don't need to do destructive work. We can kind of just cast it in place. If they're not hydraulically adequate, we're looking at how can we buy a couple years? How can we buy some time? So one method that we've been using in the past is pouring in a cement invert just to basically similar to a sacrificial wearing surface, degrade the concrete, save us some years on this CMP until we can come through with a capital replacement. Photographed here is a sinkhole that formed due to a culvert that we lost. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Gayle so she can talk about some of the funding strategies that we're implementing.
Thank you, Brian. So as I mentioned previously, with that PRRTA funding and being our primary source, it's really broken down to three main ways that we address bridges. So the first two are on capital, where it's either a named project specifically just for bridge replacement or a larger transportation project that has bridges. We use that emergency bridge fund, which is also a capital component of our funding, and that for unforeseen issues that are arising, and we also use it to leverage for local grant match requirements. Right now, our average budget is $1 million per year, but we have been carrying a management reserve that we had built up, so we have between $1 and $5 million really to be able to address emergencies as they occur. And then on the maintenance side, the bridge maintenance, Brian methodically looks at that bridge component of that $8.5 million and how he can extend the life through programmed and preventive maintenance, looking at repairs that are going to come up on a case-by-case basis, and doing that engineering work to help us make some informed decisions on applying funds in the future. Let me back up because I want you to take a look at this photo. This is rocker bearing. Hopefully no one else has the same rocker bearing, but this rocker bearing that I'm showing you now is beyond the critical angle. This is on our Fillmore Bridge, and the reason why I wanted you to be able to see this because we were able to use our condition assessment and this particular issue in our bridge to be successful in our application for one of the initial bridge investment program grants, one of 17 that came out within the country, and that's going to be addressing this condition. Our grant starts off under that program for $750,000 in federal funding to do the planning and environmental linkage for that, and then we really have laid out a program, even our grant application, how we plan on proceeding with that project and plan to apply for future funding under the bridge program underneath that grant application for future funding. Again, we leverage that emergency bridge fund for the local match. We were successful also in 2022 on getting an off-system bridge grant that is managed through the Colorado Municipal League to replace the Water Street Bridge over Camp Creek, and that award is for $1.3 million. And then we've also been successful in capturing a CRISI grant. If you're not familiar with that, that's a Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program administered by the Federal Railroad Administration to replace two railroad bridges that go over Nevada and Tejon Avenue just in the south downtown of Colorado Springs. We did get a $2.5 million grant, and that's going to be for the NEPA work and preliminary engineering. And again, that program we really set up to demonstrate how we plan on capturing funds in the future, both from a federal plan and progression and readiness, but also with our local match demonstration in the future. As Brian mentioned, though, even though this program has been extremely successful and I think we're judiciously applying the funds, we demonstrated to you that we have some bridges that are beyond their service life, and we have a huge replacement need floating out there in your group C and D. Through our analysis, we know we're going to need about $40 million per year in 2022 dollars moving forward to really address those replacement needs. So we've been working on some strategies to take to our elected officials to see how we can come up with funding ideas. One of them is going and approaching city administration to get general fund money and capturing what is HE2F. And if you're not from Colorado, HE2F is specific to that state, which is for the Highway Users Tax Fund. It does have a component that comes from the Federal Highway Trust Fund, but it also includes vehicle registration fees, oversized vehicle surcharges, late fees, retail delivery things, so it's got other components. One of the things that happened in the Colorado legislature in 2021 is they actually made a commitment to increase that HETF funding. So as that comes to the city and through the city's operations and maintenance, we're hoping to be able to capture some of those dollars to continue to address our bridge needs. Within our county, which is El Paso County in Colorado, there is a road and bridge property tax. Good or bad, it's very low. It's very attractive for a lot of people, but even with the funds that are collected right now, most of it goes to the county, and less than 1% of that actually comes to the city. So we don't really have a way from a property tax base to support that bridge infrastructure. So we are proposing to approach our elected officials to consider reconfiguring that, one, either with an increase, and then two, with a distribution that comes more to the city. And I would say the city has about 70% of the population within the county. So we think that percentage would be higher. We've also been considering a bridge-specific sales tax. And that could have two components. It could be separate or combined, either for maintenance and capital. Right now, the city has another successful sales tax-based roadway maintenance program. We refer to it as 2C, that gets authorized every 5 years by the voters. With that, we've been doing an analysis on it. We think to be able to keep up with the roadway resurfacing needs within our community, that we could potentially reduce that by 500ths. Well, instead of maybe reducing it by 500ths when we go to reauthorize that, so we'd be considering asking the voters if we could keep that 500ths and apply it specifically for bridge maintenance activities. And there's also, do you do a separate sales tax initiative just for your bridge assets? We've also been considering and investigating impact fees, which would happen upon new development. This approach is really not very popular within our county, but it's still something that's a tool in the toolbox. We want to be able to demonstrate that something should be thought about. And then we are going to continue to be extremely aggressive pursuing grants, leveraging the funds we have, and seeing where we can capture other grant opportunities within our community. So I want to thank you for your time today. Brian and I hope you've enjoyed the time hearing about our local funding source and how we leverage it for our bridge program and how we really prioritize that spend through the bridge asset management. So we are available for questions. Thank you, everyone.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.